We are now at the order of business of State Administration of Education. And it's like we have the LSO first. Ms. Hightrack.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Legislative Service Office. Again, I'm the Operations Administrator, also the staff attorney for the education-related committees. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Phillips. She's going to present this memo.
Ms. Phillips.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ashley Phillips, Legislative Editor, Legislative Service Office. I am here to present to you the memorandum titled History of State Education Agencies, Statutory Duties and Powers. As part of the committee's priority number 4 interim topic, State Administrative Review, LSO was asked to provide an overview of the state education agencies. The legislature has looked at this topic a couple times before, once in 2005 through the Management Audit Committee and once in 2014 through this committee actually in a study done by Croft and Joftis. Both of those are linked in your memo on the digital version. They're pretty large documents, so I figured you didn't want an additional 600 pages in your packet. So if you want to take a look at those and have any questions on that, happy to do that as well. Big picture, there are 5 parts to the public education in Wyoming at this time. You have the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, the State Board of Education, the Department of Education, the Professional Teaching Standards Board, and the Charter School Authorizing Board, all of whom you will hear from after this. And then there are a handful of provisions in the Constitution that address the administration of publication in the state. They're listed out for you in the memo for you to peruse. But big picture, the state superintendent is entrusted with the general oversight of the schools, while that power is exercised within the legislature's overarching authority to enact laws for the establishment and maintenance of the systems of public schools. For almost as long as Wyoming has been a state, the state superintendent and the Department of Education have been charged with administering the educational policies developed by the state board. You heard Dr. Mathern talk about that a little bit this morning. This framework in particular has not changed much since 1990 when both of those agencies were put into statute and have really only expanded to meet requirements put in place by the federal government and the court system. The Professional Teaching Standards Board was created much later in 1993, and at that point it was charged with taking over the task of certifying teachers. Again, its duties have expanded greatly over the years, but still largely remains responsible for the certification. And then finally, the last one, the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board is the most recent addition to the state public education system. It was created in 2023 to authorize charter schools at the state level. Previously, that duty or that power was limited to school districts. And then following the 2021 legislative session, the SLIB was given that power and then transferred to the Charter School Authorizing Board in 2023, apologies. That's just a very quick overview of the information presented in the memo. There's a lot more details that I'd be happy to discuss with you guys if you have any questions. But overall, the Wyoming Constitution entrusts the state superintendent with the general supervision of the public schools. The legislature has historically exercised broad authority to define by statute the structures, powers, and duties of the state education entities within those constitutional limits. Administration of public education in Wyoming has evolved into a system in which policymaking, implementation, professional regulation, and charter school authorization responsibilities have been divided among several distinct entities. The statutory framework itself has largely maintained a distinction between policy-oriented functions and administrative or ministerial functions. The legislature has refined that framework over the past 100 years or so to adapt to the changing educational needs. This overall structure reflects a consistent legislative approach to distributing educational oversight among specialized agencies with distinct statutory roles. At this point, I'm going to let Tanya address anything I may have left out.
Great job, Ashley. Just a couple of follow-up items then. From a high level, the Department of Education is the administrative arm sort of the state superintendent. And so the State Board of Education, you heard a little bit about this previously in our last discussion, but that is the entity that's charged with the policy making. That's the entity that sets the content standards, various other items. All of the policies are enacted by the State Board of Education. And then the state superintendent is the elected official that oversees the administration and implementation of those policies that are passed by the legislature and then further refined by the state board. And then the Department of Education is the entity with the workers that are actually doing, the data analysis, cutting the checks, looking at accountability. The nuts and bolts day-to-day work is conducted by that entity. And as Ms. Phillips said, that structure has been in place since 1919, sort of with that same basic organizational structure. There have been some migrations between the state superintendent, the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, PTSB, the Charter School Authorizing Board most recently. But generally speaking, that overarching policy setting with the administrative arm has been in existence since 1919. It's somewhat similar to the legislature and the executive branch. You all set the policy and enact the laws, and the governor and the executive branch is charged with implementing those and carrying those out. It's also somewhat similar to school district organization. If you look at that as well, you have your Board of Education enacting, your local Board of Trustees enacting curriculum and various other policies. And then you have the school and your superintendent carrying those policies out. So subject to your questions, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Thank you, Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question that was asked of me, which I have no idea what the history is on it. And then again, with your history that you've mentioned with the memo here, why did we take the PTSB out of the state, the Wyoming Department of Education in 93? Was there a reason for that? Was there some kind of history that they needed to be separate? Or because I've had more than one person ask me, why aren't they one and the same? And I couldn't tell them, and I have no idea what the history is as to why the legislature did that. So,
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairwoman, again, I don't have the answer as to why the legislature made that policy decision. It looks like Senator Scott has a response.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, my response may be somewhat colored in the fact that I voted no on that bill. The push came from the Wyoming Education Association that wanted to be entirely separate and felt, I think, it would have more control over the PTSB, and it was a closely contested issue, but we didn't quite have enough votes to stop it. And I think there may have been some problems at the State Department of Education that were independent, but it was mostly a push from the School Boards Association, from the Wyoming Education Association.
Chairman, if I may, I would like to clarify that certification of teachers was rested with the state board. Prior to the creation of PTSB, the department did not have that role at that time.
All right, thank you. Are there further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Lost the agenda. And not hear from the Department of Education. Director Shaner, Chief Shaner.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Dickie Shaner, Department of Ed. You're going to hear directly from all the entities that are in our memo, so I'll keep my comments brief. But I like to think of the state superintendent and the Department of Ed as both a collaborator and a connector for all these different entities, and also an implementer. So we are really the operational arm that effectuates much of all of this policy, whether it comes from you or a board or someone else. So the state superintendent of public instruction is one of our 5 statewide elected officials and charged in the Constitution with general supervision of public schools. That language has been certainly debated over the years, what exactly that means, but over time, statute has prescribed quite a few duties to the state superintendent and the department. And in order to do those, we work a lot with some of these other entities, probably the most frequently and significantly with the State Board of Education, which the state superintendent sits on that board. And then there are a couple ex officio members, and then the rest are appointed by the governor. And we talked about some of this in the basket of goods, but a lot of those things where the state board will adopt state standards, and then we will go out and we will assess those standards. We work on the accountability system, accreditation of schools. All those things are done jointly with the state board and the WDE. As was just discussed as well, the PTSB was removed from the Department of Ed in the 90s. The only extra color I could add to that, when I've tried to talk to people who worked in the department at that time when it was pulled out, to Senator Scott's point, there was, as I understand it, also an opinion at the time that when the state board was hearing those, they were hearing the actual licensure complaints in addition to all of their other duties. The opinion was that creating a board of education professionals just focused on the licensure of those teachers would benefit. And so that was the rationale I was provided by some SEA people from the 90s. The Charter School Authorizing Board is new. That is an entity which is half appointed by the state superintendent, half appointed by the governor. They do reside within the WDE's budget, but they are an independent board like the state board. They have their own executive director, and then we appoint a liaison to work with them, just like we appoint a liaison to work with the State Board of Education. So very similar structure and setup. They are charged with authorizing new charter schools that have chosen to seek approval from the state versus their local school district. And we have Chugwater, Cheyenne, and Casper open and operating, and then pending in Alpine, and an application right now from Riverton as well. So could be looking at 5 in very short order there. And then the last thing I would mention, Mr. Chairman, is just the additional education organizations. And I say additional because they all have different titles and different roles, but there are so many entities out there that work with us and that work with school districts that aren't a part of like this normal K-12 system that we talk about all the time. So I tried to list as many of them as I could in there. Just, we have our child development centers, which there's 14 regions in the state, and we have money that comes from us, goes to the Department of Health, and then goes out to those child development centers. And those schools are preschools feeding kids into our public school system in addition to providing some other services. We have private schools. We have BOCES, which are school districts cooperating together to do certain things that they couldn't otherwise do alone. We have institutional schools or facilities such as the boys and girls schools that DFS runs. And then we have a lot of other entities, and I know they're here to speak on public comment, but they are in an association called WYSA, W-Y-S-A. And those are places like the Cathedral Home, the Yes House. These are sometimes residential treatment centers, psychiatric residential treatment facilities, all serving our students in one way or another. And, I think they're an important piece of this puzzle that sometimes we don't bring to this discussion at Joint Ed that I think is appropriate as we're talking about state administration of education. They play an important role too. So with that, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Chairwoman Schuler.
Everybody else is taking their after lunch nap, I guess. So I'll ask a question. Somebody this morning, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was the state board, talked about how you guys work together. You've done a really good job working together, and I guess statutorily you're required to. But what I wondered about, is there ever a time when you guys would ever get maybe a summit together where you would have everybody involved, all of the entities involved, where you could talk about, things that are happening around the state that aren't just at WDE or state board or PTSB or, the charter schools? Is there ever a chance that we could do something like that? I think that would be really enlightening.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Madam Co-Chair. So in the past, under Superintendent Balow, we started something we called the State Superintendent's Summit. We called it S5S because S5 on the license plate. And it was invitation only. And I think it was the state board, joint education committee, local district board chairs, and superintendents to try to get that group of policymakers together talking about education policy. And that lasted for about 4 years or so, and then it kind of fizzled out. So there have been attempts to bring everybody together. I think most people try to overlap, like go to different conferences, like go to the WSBA and WASA conference and mix and mingle, but I'm not aware of one that's specifically designed to bring like those higher level policy people together just to talk to each other.
Thank you. Follow up.
No, I don't think so.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify something, the childhood development centers, are those privately owned and administered?
Mr. Chair, through you, Representative Kelly, they are private. I think they're probably set up as nonprofits. And then they do private philanthropy fundraising in addition to getting federal special ed funding that flows from the Department of Ed to the Department of Health to the CDC.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Next one. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, RJ Cost with the State Board of Education. I've lost one of the leaders and I'm the second leader, so I guess I'm supposed to introduce. We have Diana Clapp here with the State Board, and we have Lisa Williams here with the State Board. Diana will take over next, and I'll be quiet. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Dr. Mathern sends his apologies that he's not able to be here with you this afternoon. You did hear a little bit from him this morning, though, share his thoughts about the state board's work in policy setting as well as its collaboration with the Department of Education. And I would add, as well as a number of other educational agencies and boards that work for the benefit of all of our students in Wyoming. I would just reiterate maybe a couple of things, trying not to be too redundant as you've received quite a bit of information in your packet. But would bring to your attention again that the board's major policy focuses deal with authority that you have invested in the board to carry out. And that's largely in the area of standards, assessment, and accountability and accreditation. Particularly those pieces that you heard this morning, that when a change is made in one, there's that domino effect to the other. And I think that's one of the roles that your board takes very seriously, is the continuity and the deliberative process when one of those pieces of rules change. And as Deputy Shaner shared with you, working closely with the Department of Education is critical in that. They conduct all that operational arm of the requests and the rules that are set by the state board. I can speak as their coordinator. Something that I've really seen the board focus on and build over these past 5 years is the role that you've given them to reach out to Wyoming and hear the voices of Wyoming, and have really watched this board from the development of that profile of a graduate to working with the various educational agencies and associations, as well as going right directly out to schools to hear from them on the various policies. They do that now during the rulemaking process, long before it gets to any type of formal comment on those rules, but actually seeking out advice from the department, from the field, about how those rules are going to operationalize and carry out in districts for the benefit of students. So with that, again, to not be redundant, but want to focus on your questions, I would stand for any questions you might have, or if anyone has any.
Thank you, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A concern that was brought up earlier today was how we had ballooned up to 2,000 standards. We've cut back appropriately, but there's also concern we may inch our way back up to that. Could you comment on how we got there and how we can prevent getting back there? Thank you.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Representative Kelly, happy to. Thank you for that question, that opportunity. Again, speaking as the coordinator and watching the board's work on that, certainly that level of 1,800 standards, a number of ways that could have happened. I can't give you, but I can give you my impressions, my observations. And that is the process. One of the pieces is the process involved getting groups together to work on content areas in silos. Naturally, you're reviewing the ELA standards, you're reviewing the math standards, and those groups of 40 individuals that included educators as well as parents and community members coming together, but largely driven by a content area that's very passionate about their content area. And so maybe that question of how do you discern what are the essential learnings in that content area, and everything a content area specialist would want students to know. So that was some of the conversation about maybe the pieces that happened. I think you were also influenced, as was nationally, with Common Core state standards that came out, around that 2012 time. Those were massive sets of standards that districts adopted nationally. So you put those two pieces together, you're getting a large number of standards. In the board's role for its policy setting, what I can tell you they've talked about and have put into place is that Curriculum Directors Advisory Committee to the board. Their role is very specific to look at that whole picture. So as you have content specialists making a recommendation, that Curriculum Directors Advisory Committee, which is now part of the standard process for standards review, will look at that and say, is it viable? Meaning, is it for every student? And is it guaranteed? Guaranteed meaning, is it doable in the time that that's allowable for that instructional period, given all the other 9 or 10 content areas. So a safeguard has been embedded into a process that was working well, but did not have that safety trigger of someone to look at this to see that it didn't grow exponentially and out of control.
Thank you. Follow up? Further questions? Chairwoman Schuler.
Must have been all that caffeine I got at lunch. Just a question, the process itself. Let's just say somebody wanted to adapt the basket of goods, whether take away or add to. What's the process? Would it have to go through you first, then WDE? Let's just say whether it's a parent or whether it's a legislator or whatever. What is the process that we'd have to go through for that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler, I just want to clarify, make sure I understand your question. Are you talking about a change when you say basket of goods in changing whether to have a content area or not? Or are you talking about the standards within a content area?
Actually, both. At the content, maybe content and maybe some assessment for that content, either or, both.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Schuler. So a couple of things that could happen. First of all, if it was a change in a content area, I would think that would come to your table, right? Because that's in statute, and the board would redirect that to this committee. Now, having said that, you do have humanities, which is an embedded type of a content area. Probably the first and foremost content area that lends itself to being embedded and combined with other content areas. As far as the changing of the standard itself within a content area, the opportunities would be when that comes up for review, which is required every 9 years. But nothing would stop anyone from coming forward either to the state board or through the Department of Education, because they also attend, as Dr. Mathern said, all of the meetings of the state board, and they could also bring that forward to say something needed to be looked at. An example of that certainly was with the audit of the math and science standards, because that was not on normal rotation, right? So that's where a concern was raised, the number of standards that were concerned, and then also the uniformity being somewhat subjective. Can uniformity be subjective? But getting that way, all right? No longer being uniform in that schools, to just manage the volume, naturally had to prioritize what they thought were the essential learnings. So it was a great time for the board to hear that feedback, come back through, and they set up those audits for those math and science standards outside of the 9-year cycle.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Was that ever? Oh, okay. All right. And we have the PTSB next. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Andrew and committee members. My name is Brendan O'Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the Professional Teaching Standards Board. I'm joined by my Assistant Director, Stephanie Benbow. And so you do have our presentation plus our one-pager, just kind of, or we'll just kind of briefly go through that. As was mentioned, PTSB was created in 1993. And you see the statutes in there. We are one of 15 independent or semi-independent licensing boards for educators in the nation. And so we are an independent agency. Some of my counterparts are our counterparts in other states. they do some of the certification. There's kind of more of a blending, or they just have certain roles and aspects. For example, in Washington, their standards board does more with program approval of the educator preparation programs. The disciplinary matters and the certification are handled through what's their version of the Department of Education. And so we handle all of that with our tiny staff of 8. So we are very, very efficient and very frugal, I think, and watch our money with that. We had the same questions. I mean, we could look through the things. 1993, you were established. Here's so. It's like, why? So we went to sources. We met with the first director of the Professional Teaching Standards Board, Linda Stowers, and she was happy and gracious to give us some time. We also talked with Superintendent Diana Omans, Deputy Superintendent Pat Arp, who was there at the beginning as well. And they both said the same thing, that PTSB was an advisory board to the State Board of Ed for eons. Maybe not quite back from 1919. Farthest back I could find was in the 60s, though. And they would bring up discipline matters or certification issues or those things. And the State Board is saying, we've got all this other work to do. We don't want to deal with all of this. And so Superintendent Oman at the time, my understanding was a champion of the separation as well. Anecdotally, certainly we can no longer ask the source, but we heard that Superintendent Catchpole was also glad that she did not have to deal with certification pieces as well. And so, so in effect, it creates less bureaucracy in a way, because instead of having a sub-board to a board to a department, we have a unique unit that can specialize in that and work forward to that. We do have that operational autonomy. Sorry, I'm looking at the very small print with my progressive lenses here. We make our own money, basically. The certification fees pays for all of the work that we do. And we pay back the general fund for the services that we receive from the state, such as accounting services, legal services, IT services as well. And so because of that, you and your counterparts on the Joint Appropriations Committee also have direct oversight to our budget. And we are not just a line item in a larger agency as well. And so we've presented, just like we do to this committee, and I've gotten really good questions and good feedback whenever we present to either of those committees. And so our board is made up of 12 appointed positions. We have one full-time statutorily determined. The UW Dean of the College of Education is a standard seat. The others are appointed. 6 are appointed by the state superintendent. 6 are appointed by the governor. And those positions include teachers at elementary and secondary schools, elementary and secondary principals, related services providers, which are your school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists. We do have a school board member that is a member of our board as well. And so that provides the elected officials some input on who sits on that board. And while I believe Senator Scott is correct that the WEA was supportive of the separation at its formation, with the 2 elected officials appointing half of the board, well, the full board actually, between the 2, I think the power gets diluted from the association as far as who's represented on our board. We do have active licensed educators serving on our board. We do not have any retirees on our board. These are the professionals monitoring the profession, just like you see in medicine and nursing, doctors, lawyers. All of those boards have active members overviewing that, so they know what's acceptable, what's not, and then they can determine what a proper disciplinary measure may be should a case arise. We are very approachable by school districts, by you and your colleagues. I've fielded a number of questions from some of you particularly and some of your counterparts in the legislative bodies. The school districts have us on speed dial as well. They can call us up and say, you know, hey, I've got this situation. What's our options to get somebody in for us? So we've done a lot of work becoming more flexible within our statutory limit while still maintaining some high standards, that we're not just putting a warm body, so to speak, in front of the students, because they are the most important part. We want someone who is qualified or is learning to become more qualified, because that has been a case in more recent years. We've got people who are career changers who are coming in. They have that content knowledge. They have that passion about what they're teaching, but they're fine tuning their teaching pieces so that they can become fully licensed. And sorry, my phone is dying on that. And currently we manage over 24,000 active licenses. We've got a lot of people who actually have an active license who are not working as well. And our application volume average is about 5,000 applications a year. And again, I mentioned we have a staff of 8, and we have 3 people who are primarily processing all of those applications. We have testified before to this committee that we have a new online licensing system that is just over a year old, and that is actually reduced our processing time, has made our office a lot more efficient, has made our office a lot more transparent to the public. We have public search feature that we never had before. School districts can look up their employees to find out what's going on with that application that you said you turned in, and they can find out as well, and they can ask questions as well on that. And do you have anything? Yeah, okay. I do want to address the program approval part. We do oversee the educator preparation programs for the University of Wyoming College of Education, and Central Wyoming College has a program, a BAS, Bachelor of Applied Science in Early Childhood and Early Childhood Special Education that we've provided approval. That's not a rubber stamp. Literacy has been a big topic to this committee and across the nation. We did a review of the reading endorsement last year, and that had to have some hard conversations with the university, and they have made some changes moving forward to address those. And they've actually gone beyond and have actually created a new dyslexia specialist program that's in the works as well. And so the feedback that our board provides to our stakeholders is relevant, is actual. It's like, again, they're active people in the communities. They're active teachers and working for the benefit of the students. And so that was a little bit scattershot, but I think I covered everything that's on the one pager and in your PowerPoint, but I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Chairwoman Schuler.
See what happens when I'm not being the chairperson. I get to ask all kinds of questions. No, these are questions that I've had. And the biggest thing I think, number one, is I've always felt like, your busy time is probably starting right now throughout the entire summer. So maybe 2 questions. First of all, do you think that, because you're a very small department, that you have the staffing that you need to be able to stay up with it? I think you said 5,000 applications a year. That's quite a bit. Let's answer that one first, and then I've got a follow-up.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and Co-Chairman Schuler. Yes, especially with the implementation of our new online system. That has taken previously in our legacy system, we were getting PDF applications in and having to review those and then email the person back, hey, can you send this in? You forgot. And a lot of back and forth. And our processing time during the summer, which is our busy months, was 6 to 8 weeks. Now, granted, there's a lot of variance within that. Some of that is for a new licensee to get background checked. They go through the Division of Criminal Investigation. That office historically was a little understaffed as well and would take 2 to 3 weeks for us to get that background check. So, well, we're waiting for that, but it impacts our processing time. DCI is now getting back background checks within 2 weeks and sometimes less than that. That improves our efficiency, but we also, with the online system, has more direct contact with the applicant. Our licensing time, we've reduced our overall down to about 4 weeks, and we're actually processing at around 20 days.
You're going to follow up first and then I'll jump on.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just my follow-up would be basically, do you think the fees are where they need to be? Because you're basically independent and that's what funds your department, correct? I mean, I know they've gone up just like everything else, but are they where they need to be for you guys to be able to be efficient and do what your job needs you to do?
Chairman and co-chairman, yes. And we have had to raise fees over time. As anybody else who runs a business or who lives life has to pay more. But yes, and we do want to keep lean because, we don't have a state helicopter or anything like that. We're just paying our bills. We're in a state building. We don't have any rent. We've reduced our copying costs. We've done a lot of those things. So yes, at this point, and I work with our accounting office and the budget office as well to make sure, yes, we are doing well. We are not allowed to save money, but we have budgeted wisely and can cover all of our costs.
Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the timeline, you mentioned the background checks taking around 2 weeks at this point in time. Do you do that as a serious process where you send something out for a background check and then it's basically on pause until you get the response? Or are you doing the work in parallel where, for example, as soon as I get the name, I send it out and then I do the work and at some point we get this in? You obviously have it as a gatekeeper, but you can theoretically continue work unless you have a high, I can't imagine your failure rate through a background check is a significant portion. Maybe I'm wrong, but how is that done?
Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yes, we do. The licensing staff do continue to kind of touch the application while they're waiting for the background check. We actually, in our new system, have created a new status that says license. It's abbreviated, but basically it's licensing specialist review complete, waiting background or pending background. And so as soon as we get a cleared background, they can see that, boom, issue, and then it's done. The delay or the rejection rate is very slight. We do have some, and it depends on the severity of the crime often that's listed.
Okay. Quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So my takeaway then is that at this point, based on the new system, that DCI background check really has effectively no influence on the timeline unless the rest of the process is taking less time than the DCI background check, right? You've got them running fully in parallel. Is that accurate? Because I don't see a reason not to do it that way, and I'm hopeful that that's what you're telling me.
Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, yes, we are working unless there's other things that the applicant is missing
Right.
as part of the application. But if we have a complete everything that we need, we're just waiting for the background. Yes, we've kind of walked through the steps, made sure everything's in place. Everything meets our regulations. We're just waiting for that clearance. As soon as that comes through, then once we kind of get that notification, we can, and it literally is pushing a button that says approve. And then the system automatically generates the certificate that gets automatically emailed to the applicant.
Great.
Whereas in our old system, my licensing staff would have to type out that certificate, which takes about 10 minutes, and then attach it to an email to send to the person.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, basic question is, what is the rejection rate on the applications that you do get? Do you, other than the background check, do you have significant number of applications turned down? And what influence does whether they're licensed in another state have?
Okay, Chairman, Senator Scott, the denial rate, and I'd probably call it denial rate at this point for the application, is really low. I don't even 1% to 2% maybe. And the reasons for that vary. Sometimes it is a background check issue. And then it just becomes, that's too egregious to have you in front of children. Or it's like, that's pretty worrisome. Sometimes from other states, their rules and our rules don't always align. So we don't always take a straight across license from the state that a person's moving to. So there may be some questions that we're working out that way. But sometimes those we have other avenues that we can address those.
Mr. Chairman, unrelated question. How many disciplinary actions against licensees do you have in the course of a year?
Chairman, Senator Scott, we've been averaging, I want to say, about 50 a year. And I don't have that data in front of me, but the vast majority of those are dismissed once we've done an investigation through that. Or the next level up is providing an advisory letter that says, you're getting close to that boundary. Let's stop it there before you go over. For any like serious revocations or suspensions, that is, a handful a year potentially.
Follow up. All right, further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Janine Bayteski, and I'm the chair of the Wyoming Charter School Authorizing Board. And as it's been said, we're the new kid on the block, so to speak. And with me today is John Waller, our executive director. Just to refresh, the board is, first of all, the board requires that any of us that sit on the board have an education background of some sort. There were 3 of us appointed by the governor, 3 appointed by the state superintendent, 1 from the University of Wyoming, and 1 from the state board, which is Fred Von Ahrens. To remind you what the statute calls out as our duty, basically our duties were to establish policies governing the charter school organization capacity and operations, soliciting and evaluating charter applications, conducting ongoing oversight and performance evaluations, making charter approval, renewal, and revocation decisions, and serving as the LEA or the lead education agency for the schools. I wanted to talk a little bit about our challenges, and then I wanted to take you into a little bit more. As you talked all morning about accountability, I want to just share with you how we are going about trying to make sure these schools are accountable to us. First, one of the major challenges that has surfaced this year, as we have 3 schools that are going into their 4th year. There was a reprieve for the first 3 years where those schools were, their ADM was determined by their actual October ADM count. Well, in year 4, what we're seeing is these schools are continuing to grow, but the districts in which they're housed may be seeing a decline, and consequently, we are seeing schools that are being shorted. We've got one school that could likely lose about 30% of their budget. Their present enrollment is 126 students. They think next year they're going to be at 150, and they're going to be funded at 108 because the district in which they reside is declining. We have another one which Senator Scott is in your neighborhood, which is experiencing a similar kind of issue. You've heard me say that starting a charter school, one of these charters, is not for the faint of heart. The people that do this are passionate and committed to doing it because they are doing it on their own time and their own dollar until the school doors open. Let's take Alpine, for instance, which is going to open in August. They've not received a dime of state money. They've had to move buildings in to have classrooms. Any of the legal expenses, any of the expenses have been basically absorbed by the community in any fundraising they've done until they start school in August. This also applies to the lease payments. Lease payments don't begin for these schools until school starts the first year. Now, saying that, I also want to remind you, because I've heard that there's some confusion about this. At the present time, the state of Wyoming does not own any of the buildings that these charters reside in. They have all formed corporations, and the corporations then deal with our state facilities people for lease payments. But if the school was to fail, for example, the state of Wyoming would have no responsibility for those buildings, because I've heard that was discussed last month. One of the other challenges that we have is that there are, and it's kind of interesting because I think, you know, it's all about, if you go back through the statutes, there's things that have happened that we never anticipated would happen as statutes were created. So there's many statutory references to districts. For example, districts can receive CTE money, but these schools are not part of a district, so consequently they don't receive any of that money. Transportation isolation payments are based on a district, and these schools aren't part of a district. So it's those kinds of things that we are in the process of trying to pull together for you all so that we can get them cleaned up. They're simple cleanups, I think. And I don't think that it was ever intended that we would have schools outside of the district structure. We work very collaboratively, and, you know, we basically have 2 resources. We have our executive director, John, and we have a liaison from the Department of Ed. And that's it. So now to take you through, why did we need an executive director? And I'll tell you what, his job is mind-boggling to me, how he juggles all the balls to get all of this done. But if you start with the application and review approval and the collection of data associated with that, we are in the process right now. Last week, in fact, we were in Riverton reviewing an application. That application is 500 pages long. After the board approves the application, then the process goes into the development of a contract between the board and that school. And what you're going to find moving forward is, you know, we inherited the 3 schools, the first 3 schools from the SLIB board. What you're going to see moving forward is we are not going to have any of the confusion around facilities we've had in the past, because as with Alpine, where there is actual facilities language in terms of their ability to change facilities without our approval. Moving forward, all of those schools will have the same language in their contracts, is that it will require the WICSAP board approval on facilities. After that's done, then there's the authorization to start up. And the startup process is probably in the neighborhood of about 12 to 18 months. And there's a formal document that John reviews with the schools, going through the checklist basically of all of the things that need to happen because, you know, I don't think any of us could have anticipated all the little steps that are associated with that. And candidly, with our most valuable asset, our children at stake here, it's really important that we make sure all of those steps get taken and done correctly. After they get started, there's the startup monitoring, mentoring, and checking, routine meetings. John meets with them on a monthly basis. And for two reasons is, in addition to just the discussions, and he does have one-on-ones with the schools, but just the discussion amongst themselves is, I think it's really important that they learn from each other. And so these discussions, I think, are really, really helpful in trying to generate learnings between the schools. Next is the annual public school compliance reviews, which is everything from the academic framework to the governance framework to the financial framework to continuous improvement plans, growth and compliance initiatives. And John is a significant resource to these people. And then the next step, which is the one that we will be coming up on about a year from now, will be the charter school renewal process, because we'll have 3 schools that will be hitting their 5th year and will be up for renewal. So Fred, our state board rep, and I actually worked on this document. The purpose of it is to try and develop a system which allows us, from the application process through the renewal process, to put in place a data management system so that at the end of the day, it's as simple as going back into the data management system and pulling out the documents and ensuring that everything has been done correctly as they're moving forward. In addition to such things as accreditation, when they move forward, of our schools, only one of them at this time has gone through accreditation, and that is Chugwater or Prairie View School, because it's the only school that has a high school associated with it at this point. And just a sidebar is that unlike our traditional K-12 districts, these charters do not go through the state board and the Department of Ed for accreditation. They come through our board. And so you can see that Mr. Waller does a lot of work. This is not for the faint of heart. This is really about commitment and passion for these schools starting up. And I'm really proud of where they've come. And at the present time, we have what, John, 700 kids roughly?
Got the numbers in here. I don't have a calculator. No. Yeah, yes, just shy of 700. And we have Alpine opening in the fall, so yeah, that'll add.
So I'd stand for any questions you might have.
Thank you. So we have a couple. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't fully understand what you led off with in terms of the funding of the schools. It sounded to me like, and I'm sure I understood correctly, that we might have a problem we're going to have to legislate on. Could you?
Yes, I will.
Explain in a little more detail, and how much of a overall percentage difference is it making in the budgets of the existing charter schools?
So let me take your school, for instance. Like I said, your school is going into, the middle school is going into year 4. And they are sitting at about 367 students, I believe. right now, it is appearing based on, they are also going to be adding another grade this year. But in addition to adding a grade, they are also adding students down below that, particularly kindergarten, first grade levels. With the way that things have been written, and particularly with recalibration recently, is their ADM calculation, Senator Scott, will be based on the situation in Natrona County School District. So if Natrona County School District is seeing a decline in enrollment, their calculation will be based on that same formula for their ADM, regardless of the fact that they plan on adding another 100 students this year. So they stand to lose in the neighborhood of about 30%.
Chairman,
Senator Scott.
they're going to lose 30% from what they had last year in total.
In addition to, they're not going to be compensated for the students that are coming in.
It's coming in.
Mr. Chairman, we got a problem.
Yeah.
Sorry, Representative Erickson had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my exact question. I wished I would have beat him to it, but how does that all relate in the recalibration? So, yeah, mine was covered.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's go to Mr. Wilmarth because that's not accurate.
I guess simplistically to me, Mr. Chair, I would suggest we need to find some way to allow these schools to grow independent of what's happening with the districts around them and not being influenced by, because I think we are eventually going to be hurting kids.
Mr. Wilmarth, do you have any comments on?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Wilmarth, LSO. This impact is not related to the recalibration effort. That's the first point I want to make. Each state authorized charter school or charter schools that came before them knew before they open up their doors that the law was written that for the first 3 years of operation, your enrollment for that school year is utilized in the formula for funding your ADM. So when a new school opens up in a district, the first year that it opens, it does not receive any funding because the block grant model uses the prior year ADM as a basis for determining funding. Charter schools receive the benefit for the first year of its operation of basing its average daily membership on its actual enrollment count as of October 1st of that school year. So when these charter schools open up, that is what is utilized for the first 3 years. Additionally, if a charter school opens up with less than 13 grades, so less than a K-12 grade configuration, if it expands its grades, that additional grade or grades are added in that year in which that occurs. Nothing changed as a result of that from the recalibration effort. So, for example, here in Casper, Natrona County School District number 1, the Wyoming Classical Academy, this school year has approximately 367 students. It will be its 4th year of operation in school year 2026-27. So the decision point on its ADM will be the greater of its 3-year average or the prior year, but based upon the district's overall ADM in Natrona County, it will be utilizing the 3-year average. So its initial ADM for the 4th year will be based upon its 3-year average. Additionally, it will receive an adjustment of approximately 30 students on October 1st to account for its expanded grade. Our estimations, and I think this is on the LSO's website for the model that was posted online, the ADM for that school will be approximately 361 ADM as opposed to 367 ADM that they have this school year. So that's kind of where we're at, but this isn't new. This was on the books when they initiated their application. Whether the legislature wants to modify the law, that's a policy choice. This isn't a issue as a result of the recalibration effort. I just want to make sure that that's a clear understanding. And every other charter school that has been in place since the charter schools statutes have been on the books has experienced the same phenomenon if the district in which they operate is in a decreasing ADM environment. So just want to kind of give a little bit of context of what's going on there.
So, Mr. Chair, the place where recalibration comes into this is y'all went from a 3-year rolling average to a 2-year rolling average. And as we're seeing the enrollments go down more sharply, that 2 years versus Matt did a wonderful job of explaining it much better than I did, but that 2-year, that difference does hurt a bit.
Mr. Chairman, and in that
ahead.
case, I think actually benefits the Wyoming class because the prior 2 years is greater on average, prior 3 years.
All right, thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I'll confess to be totally confused at this point. As I understood Matt's explanation, the charter school here is essentially funded on an ADM basis, almost the same as it was last year. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Scott, yes. I mean, the estimates we have, it's approximately 6 students difference. They will likely have 367 students in that. They have 367 students in this school year. The model ADM next additional expansion of grades will be about 361 students. It'll be about 30 students lower than what is actually enrolled. But it's no different than a district which is growing, is always funded on its kind of prior year ADM.
I stand corrected. They told us this is the information we've been getting from them, so I stand corrected.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
I think the possible solution there, though, is to decouple those schools from the district because there is, for a district, if the district is in decline, they want the prior 2 years. And if it's going up, they want the previous year. So they want that selection. You have an adverse selection event taking place, though, for our charter schools where oftentimes they're running exactly contrary to the district because they might be taking or giving students to or from the district. So it does make sense that you'd have a different election for the charter school where on a charter school basis, they could choose whether they wanted the greater of last year's enrollment or the prior 2-year average so that it's not the district that's making the selection for them. That doesn't fully resolve necessarily the concerns. And again, we've had this in place for a long time. They knew it when they were coming in, but there is some hostility to the way the formula is structured for the charter schools because they are clearly not operating within the same up or down window as the district is. So that could be something that would be an easy remedy by statute if the education committee wanted to make that.
And Mr. Chair, keep in mind that these students are not all coming from the district.
Yeah.
We have a fairly high percentage of them coming from homeschooled.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you.
All right.
I think we will go ahead and take our break before we go to public comment since we're so close to it. So we'll return in at 3 p.m. The meeting will come back to order and we'll now take public testimony on what subject are we on now? State administration. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Sarah Cavalier. I'm the Executive Director of Teton Youth and Family Services and the Wyoming Youth Services Board President.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Clark Fairbanks, and I'm the Director of the Wyoming Youth Service Association. I appreciate your time this afternoon, and thank you for the break. It's always better to come back after a break. We've provided a handout to you that I just want to give you a visual reference of that will guide our discussion today. And we again, the Wyoming Youth Services Association is a membership association of nonprofit youth service agencies. And as Chief of Staff Shaner talked about, we represent some of those additional education systems. Specifically, members of the Wyoming Youth Service Association that we're talking about are St. Joseph's Children's Home, Cathedral Home for Children, Teton Youth and Family Services, Youth Emergency Services, and Region 5 BOCES and Northeast Wyoming BOCES for reference. These programs provide specialized education services for students with behavioral health, special education, developmental, therapeutic, and residential treatment needs, many of whom cannot be appropriately served in traditional education settings. Collectively, last year, these programs served 235 Wyoming students, primarily middle school and high school. Wyoming students in 25, all Wyoming education programs for the WYSA agencies are accredited. So they're accredited schools and they operate in coordination with Wyoming school districts and Wyoming Department of Education. We also interact closely with Wyoming Department of Health and Department of Family Services. Many of the youth are court-placed, some are medically placed, and some are school district placed. But they're all, these are not voluntarily placed served kids that we're talking about. It's really those highest need kids from Wyoming, students from Wyoming. So the core issue that we're here to talk about is historically, these programs operated alongside the Wyoming Boys School and Girls School as part of Wyoming's broader institutional education system. We were often referred to as Wyoming institutional schools. And around 2020, there was really a clarification that institutional schools, from a legal standpoint, are Wyoming state agencies where there's direct state oversight. And so clarifying, it left us in limbo. And we continue in limbo as far as what is our legal status. And we have, for you today, a request to try to clarify that and put that into our legal structure of education. And so as a result, the Wyoming Nonprofit Residential Treatment and Special Purpose Education programs have really been left out. We don't have a clearly defined legal education classification, which affects direct eligibility for many state and federal funds. Equitable funding mechanisms at times are not available to us because of our ambiguity of legal status. And it's also put into question the transfer of credit recognition within the system. And even though we're accredited and issue credits, there's some ambiguity because we don't have a legal status. And it just gets into that complication. These schools now exist in statutory and administrative limbo or gap. So it's clear we've been working with Wyoming Department of Education to try to work on this, and we've received some clarifications. It's clear we're not a traditional school district, so we're not an LEA, a local education authority. We're not a private school in the traditional sense. We're private nonprofit and accredited schools, but we're part of Wyoming's educational system. We're not a charter school, even though, again, we're accredited. And so why this matters, Wyoming students placed in residential treatment and special purpose education settings, we believe deserve continuity of education, seamless transfer of credits, access to special education services, equitable education funding, and consistent statewide recognition of the coursework and diplomas. And that's historically how we've operated. So currently, the lack of formal classification creates barriers for students and schools alike. This results in inequitable access. The schools serving Wyoming's highest need students are also unable to directly access many of the educational funding streams available to traditional districts. So we operate on a reimbursement model within the state system. We do a cost study. So we submit our audited financials to a third-party guidehouse who does an analysis of allowable cost based on the prior year, which then in the future year determines a reimbursement rate that we receive per student per day. So there's really a 2-year delay in capturing any changes in our costs, just for kind of a reference of that. So what we don't have access to because of a limbo in our legal status at times are things like career technical education funding. I've listened this last session to some of the tech replacement program as an example that might be really beneficial for students served in our facilities, high-risk kids who really need those connections. Title I funding that flows from the federal government to local education entities. There's some homeless funding, literacy grant, just as some examples of some of the areas that would be really beneficial to the students that we serve. And by clarifying that legal status will help. So we, just cutting to the chase, we really have 3 things we would like to ask you to consider in this interim topic, and tomorrow as you discuss your committee directives, to think about these 3 areas. And the first on the second page is establishing a formal statutory classification. And we've worked with the Department of Ed really around researching what some other states use for similar agencies and programs like ours. And we're not here to say that this is the only definition or classification that may work, but it seems to be working in other states as non-public special purpose school. And that definition then is accredited education programs that provide specialized educational, behavioral, therapeutic, and residential services to students whose needs cannot be fully met in a traditional school setting. It would recognize the unique role that these programs play within Wyoming's continuum of education. And again, I think it differentiates us from, for example, the Wyoming Boys School and Girls School, very similar programs educationally, at times similar student populations, but they're state agencies, direct state oversight, where we're a nonprofit youth service agency where the state oversight is really through the accreditation process that we go through, similar to what public schools used to go through. It's Cognia is the accrediting body that's used for these programs. The second would be in clarifying legal status. We would ask that clarifying in statute that accredited non-public special purpose schools are eligible to apply for and receive, where it's appropriate, state education grants, state administered federal pass-through funding, education loans or reimbursements where we fit the definition for those services. Again, I hope you understand that you can't apply for something if you don't have a legal standing or legal status, and that has really been one of the challenges. The third is really a little bit outside of that, the legal status and the eligibility for grants. And it's a pressing issue for the providers that are here, represented by WISA, and that is the current model that we're operating under that has approximately a 2-year delay is really around recalibration and the teacher, adjustment for teachers and educators in that recalibration. Unfortunately, currently in that model, there's no way for us to receive that unless we can increase teacher pay this next year. That will be captured in our cost study next year and then put into that following year's reimbursement rate. And so there you can see, as nonprofit youth service agencies serving really high needs kids, what we're asking is really that the legislature, whether that's statutory, but really providing recalibration adjustments so we can be competitive with educator compensation and have timely reimbursement structure. And go ahead, Sarah.
Can just speak to that directly. As recalibration happened, we ended up losing 2 teachers out of our 5 teachers and a therapist to the schools. And that was a direct result of what recalibration did. So now our school and program has holes in it because it's gone to the public district, which is, it's just a really hard shift in small communities because it's not like we have a ton of people available to do these hard jobs. And so they're very valuable when they leave. It leaves a big gap.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think that as you can see in that business model, that reimbursement model, it's just really challenging for us. And I don't think it's intended, but as we've worked with the department, I think there's not real clear legal guidance on how to do it. What we had proposed is the possibility that we implement a rate that's based on the recalibration for teachers, and our teachers are also teaching year-round, not a 9-month schedule. It's usually approximately 220 instructional days because it goes through the summer for credit recovery. Many of the students we serve are deficient in their learning, but also in their credit and credit recovery. So that's a really important aspect of what we provide. So the challenges are really a way that could be captured or acknowledged in the year in which it occurs.
I guess I also want to go to the impact of these schools is we're seeing an average of kids coming in 2 grade levels behind. And then when they leave our programs, they're at grade level or above. So the interventions we're doing are helping kids get back on track so that when they leave our residential treatment center, they're not showing up at school already behind. They're actually showing up where their peers are and can plug back in and hopefully be on a better trajectory to graduate.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, that's our presentation and our request of you, and we'd stand for any questions that you might have.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very clear and concise summary of the condition here. It might help me, though, if you could please briefly contrast the visions, your visions of the future of these institutions of being released from statutory purgatory versus adopting your recommendations here. Could you just briefly what these institutions will look like if we don't make these changes versus what they could be?
Please go ahead.
I would be delighted to tell you that, Mr. Chairman, sorry. I would be delighted to talk to that. Right now, when we have any need for any additional supports in our schools, we are being asked to go through our local school district to obtain the funds through Title I funding to serve kids that are outside, that are coming from out of district. And it has been creating a conflict in terms of our local school district wanting numbers of students that are outside of the school district because we are a residential treatment center that's serving the whole state of Wyoming. So we get out of the lane of local reporting, we're doing more state reporting, if that makes, does that make sense? Okay.
Follow up? No. Further questions? Sorry, Chairwoman Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just go back a little bit in history. You talk about how these programs were funded, and then about 2020, only, the boys' school and the Wyoming Girls' School received the kind of funding that you may have had in the past. What caused that, or do you know what the deal was? It was us, the legislature, that screwed it up again, or was there something else that I'm not aware of?
Mr. Chairman, there was an incident, I believe, with a school that prompted that removal of that designation. I also think that it became abundantly clear when ARPA money came out and we all couldn't apply for any of it because we needed to be an LEA. And that's sort of when the red flag went up of, wait, what? We're not eligible for any of this. And that's about the point in time we started working with the Department of Ed to try to figure out what was going on.
Can I have a follow-up?
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then would it be better I know we looked at doing some legislation with LEAs, trying to get more folks headed down that path. Would it be better for you to go that route, or the statutory changes that you mentioned here on the back side? Would that be a better way to go?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Schuler. So it would be better to go with this route that we've proposed for the simple reason that the way the institutional schools operate is the child still remains enrolled with the district of origin. And if we became an LEA, they would have to disenroll in that local education authority. And that's not our role. I mean, that gets into some of the differences between a private school or a charter school. We're really there to serve those behavioral mental health needs, to catch them up academically. The school district still maintains the responsibility of an IEP. We provide the educational services and coordination. So again, those facilities are serving children from all over the state districts. And that part works. And so just clarifying that legal status of what we are would really work best for the students because they're transitioning back to that public school. And again, our goal is for those students to come back into there with a plan, a demonstrated plan that works for the student to be successful, to meet their needs, and to graduate from their home school, their home district, in almost all cases. Yep.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time. I will be available tomorrow online just in case you have questions that come up with that. So thank you again.
Thanks. Further public testimony? Seeing no. All right. Welcome back.
Thanks. Sarah Bieber, resident of Casper. Had to write this one down so that I just made sure I got everything kind of more in a fluid manner. The testimony and materials that all of you have seen today with the different parts of our education system, I think demonstrate exactly why you guys should consider restructuring the Department of Ed and the roles of the Superintendent of Public Instruction. The Wyoming Constitution is remarkably clear. It provides that the general supervision of public schools shall be entrusted to the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. There are court cases and Supreme Court cases that reinforce that. The LSO memorandum notes that the superintendent is the only constitutional education officer for the state of Wyoming. The State Board of Education, the Professional Teachers Standards Board, and the Wyoming Charter School Authorization Board, and even the Department of Education itself exists because the legislature created them. What stands out from today's information is how fragmented the educational governance has become. The Wyoming Department of Education describes itself as the operational hub. It manages funding, supports districts, staffs, the State Board of Education, so the paid staff actually comes from the Department of Ed, appoints members to other boards, administers federal programs, implements laws and regulations, yet the State Board of Education establishes the standards, assessments, accountability systems, accreditation requirements, graduation requirements, statewide support systems. The teacher's licensing is handled through a separate board, and the charter school authorization is handled through yet another independent board. The result is a system where authority is divided among multiple entities, but accountability is not always clear. Who is ultimately responsible? Is it the superintendent, the state board, the professional teacher standard board, the charter school authorization board? The answer is usually some combination of all of them or some of them, depending. That is the problem. That's the problem. That's the issue. It's not whether these entities collaborate or work well together or whether they have good working relationships. Every document that you have on your agenda for material says that the committees collaborate, partnerships, coordination, share responsibilities. Those are all good things, don't get me wrong. Collaboration is not accountability. The legislature should not design a governance system around everyone getting along. It should design a system around clear responsibility. When parents are concerned about students, when taxpayers question spending, or when legislators seek answers about educational outcomes, there should be a clear chain of authority leading to a clear, accountable leader. Instead, Wyoming has created a system where authority is spread across multiple boards, agencies, and entities. When things go well, everybody can share the credit, but when things go poorly or there's questions, responsibility becomes difficult to clarify. I have heard the state superintendent argue that there are certain decisions or outcomes that are beyond her authority of her office. Maybe that's true under the current law. If it is true, it raises one simple question. Why are we electing a state superintendent to be accountable for public instruction if we have not given that office the authority necessary to carry out that responsibility? Either the superintendent is responsible for educational outcomes, in which case the office should have the authority to act, or the superintendent is not responsible, in which case, do we have a clear way to hold anyone accountable? Many states have moved towards more consolidated educational governance models. Wyoming remains one of relatively few states that have and maintain both an independent state board with substantial policy-making authority and a professional standards teacher board, along with the other entities that we have. There's only 12 other states that do what we currently do. If people elect a state superintendent, that office should have clear responsibility for educational administration, implementation, licensure, professional reporting, The boards are great at advisory roles. They provide expertise, stakeholder input, oversight, but the public deserves to know who is responsible. When parents, teachers, legislators, and taxpayers want answers about student achievement, educational quality, or administrative performance, there should be one office accountable to the public, not a maze of agencies and boards. I will also like to say that the fiscal responsibility for the boards, travel to meetings, to and from things, attendance, those kinds of things, is duplication of service in a multitude of different ways. And if you house all of that within the Department of Ed, the authority, it starts to clear. They can each do their independent jobs all within the Wyoming Department of Ed with the statutory of authority that they currently maintain without adjusting too many things. They would just function in their same roles, just under one authority. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, the biggest division we've got in authority is between the elected state superintendent of public instruction and the locally elected school boards. How do we deal with that relationship? Is that something that needs to be considered as we talk about some of these things?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I think because the school boards and sometimes the school districts and the administration can't go just to the Wyoming Department of Ed and get all of the answers. They're directed to the other entities also. And yes, although there is partnerships and collaborations and there's different things among those entities, it gets fragmented, or maybe the district superintendent will get a different answer than a school board member trying to find information, depending on who they reached out to. So I think that frustration could be simplified if you housed everybody under the Department of Ed. Yes, you can still have the State Board of Education under the Department of Education and clarify this is what the authority level is. And so then you would have a progression of the district is trying to get this information on this thing and it's going to go through this pathway. They didn't get what they needed. It goes to the next level instead of the different entities that don't always, the message doesn't always get there.
So, Mr. Chairman, so you think if we were to consolidate, for instance, State Board of Education into the Department of Education, that would simplify life for the local school districts considerably and make it easier for that part of the system to work?
Mr. Chair, Senator Scott, yes, I do. I think having clear leadership with accountability for not just the districts, but the other elected officials at the school district level, it definitely would make more sense that you had a set level to go through.
Mr. Chairman, we did deliberately put the most recent decision here was the charter schools, and that was put elsewhere because the school districts were otherwise simply not allowing charters in most cases. So that one I'd have trouble. The others I don't know, Mr. Chairman. We would depend how we felt about it and what we could make work best for all the parties.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I think articulation. So yes, charters are different. They are still public schools, but they're different. The testimony that we heard on the very different education system, the private nonprofit education system, I think that there needs to be articulation that is better than the fragmented individual systems that we have right now. So could the charter schools still have a certain articulation with the Department of Ed, not necessarily house under or have complete authority over the charter board, but I think there needs to be yes, separate, but incorporated, whereas the licensing, the State Board of Education, all of that authority is by our statutes currently under the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the state. So I think those things would house better under the Department of Ed versus the charter.
Thank you. Are there further questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is there any further public testimony? Please go ahead.
Chairman, my name is Mary Schmidt. I'd just like to touch on what Sarah had said, that I wouldn't recommend that the committee takes on every educational board. I would focus on the State Board of Education and the Teachers Professional Teaching Standard Board, because those two directly affect how public schools operate, how their curriculum, how their standards, how the payment, all that functions. I do believe the state superintendent and the Constitution clearly outlines it as an elected position to oversee the governance of schools. So therefore, these two boards fit under that and would better work if their staffs as is consolidated under the state superintendent of public instruction and worked more jointly together in that manner. I don't think we need a separate appointed board for the State Board of Education to make that functional if we just moved it under the state superintendent of public instruction, who is elected by the people, and then it gives a direct line of responsibility for the parents, for the people of this state who want quality education. They now know that state superintendent of public instruction holds that responsibility. Currently, they don't. And what does the State Board of Education, who are they responsible to? They're not responsible to us, the parents, because we have no say in it currently. And so that disconnect from our Constitution and from the way we function needs to be addressed. And it's a very important connection that we need to make. Parents need to know that the state superintendent of public instruction that they're voting for is directly on the hook for the standards, for quality teachers, for curriculum, for all of it. That's where it should be coming from. And as school boards go, we work with who we have to work with. And it's much easier if you go to the Wyoming Department of Education and deal with the people there instead of having to find these different entities and work and collaborate in widespread. It makes it more difficult. So I strongly recommend that you guys look at the fiscal impact of combining these under one roof and funding it in a more streamlined manner. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Is there any further public testimony? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jeremy Smith, Business Manager, County School District Number 1. I didn't really have anything specific to testify on until I heard the last two speakers, and my perspective would do the exact opposite of what they just said. Centralization of authority typically doesn't become the most responsive form of authority to the districts who need help. So right now, when our superintendent has a difficult question on teacher licensure, hey, can we hire this person? Can they perform this function? It really is just a very quick call to Mr. O'Connor. It works very well. I'm not sure consolidating that responsibility to a department that you typically underfund all the time would be the better option. That PTSB is funded by the license holders. And so their audience, their responsibility is to license holders, right? And so I'm just again, just didn't sort of expect this testimony today, but I would tell you do the exact opposite. Decentralize everything. In fact, stop having so much power at the state level. Give it back to the locally elected school boards, right? I mean, I just don't understand why consolidating that to save $4 is going to do any good about being more responsive to the needs of the districts. The State Board of Education has a big job. But other people and other experts are appointed because of their expertise. They're not just an 18-year-old who happens to put their name on the ballot before May 29th. Right? So I just caution you, do the opposite. Decentralize the authority to the people who should have it and are most closely represented by their communities, the school boards. So anyway, that's my comments, Mr. Chairman. I don't really have anything specific other than to say, don't centralize stuff. That feels like a power grab. Don't do that. Do the opposite. So stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually don't have a question for Mr. Smith, but we have the PTSB here, and I was hoping I could ask them a question if they were amenable to it.
Let's go ahead.
I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Further public testimony. Representative Kelly.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd ask them to come up to answer a question.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. I was in a side conversation and I missed that. but
And I know the
it-
caffeine is not sunk in yet, sir.
Brendan O'Connor, Executive Director, PTSB, Stephanie Benbow, Assistant Director. Okay.
Am I free to ask, Mr. Chair? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The idea of consolidation, how would it affect the Standards Board to be operating underneath a partisan elected official?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Our board has been very nonpartisan and non-political. Over the last, I was trying to think how many, well, over the existence of PTSB's existence, there have been 3 instances where the state superintendent did not fulfill their term in office. One individual was deemed so ineffective, the legislature came in and changed that role until the court said, you can't do that. And it was replaced. And PTSB continued its job.
Follow up. All right. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Teresa Chalk, Superintendent, Lincoln One, Kimmer. Again, what Jeremy wasn't going to comment, but just listening today, 2 things came up. Number one, I personally like the way our structure is right now. I've been in the same district 28 years, 19 as a superintendent. I know when I need to go to the WDE, when I need to go to the Board of Education or PTSB. And I appreciate the system we have because it allows for collaborative debate. If we are under one system and we all answer to the state superintendent, not we, but these committees, if they answer to one person, I think that stifles debate, and we have a great public education system, and we fight tooth and nail with each other, with our different entities, and that's why we're great. If you have everybody answering to one person, you mind a little better because your paycheck's tied to it. So I like our system. I think Wyoming, we're great, we're free, and we fight for what we believe in. And I don't want to see any changes to that. And then I heard a lot of talk about reimbursement. I don't care if you're a charter school, a school district, yes, house. We all have lived under the reimbursement system since, well, for the 28 years I've been here. We are reimbursed. Even if you're the foundation guarantee, we're paid next year for this year's ADM. It's always reimbursed. So if you change it for one, you need to change it for all. And that's all I have. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Scott.
Just one, could you refresh our memory as to which school district you're?
Lincoln One, Kimmer. Very proud to say.
Further, okay. Further public testimony. Seeing none, public testimony is now closed. We are going to hold off on committee directives until the end of tomorrow, but is there any discussion on the committee before we adjourn? Chairman Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think, just like today, there was so much information. I appreciate all the testimony. I think it's nice to be able to go back to your room, your hotel, wherever it is you're staying, kind of chew on things and take a look at them, maybe do a little more research. That's kind of why I like to go the last day so that, and we can even maybe talk amongst ourselves during the breaks a little bit. It'd be difficult for me to try to come up with anything yet that I can, put my teeth into, I guess, today. So I would suggest we wait, but it's, certainly up to the committee.
No further discussion? Nothing on anyone's mind? All right. We are adjourned until tomorrow at 8:30 a.m.